Welcome to the Biz Owner 360 podcast, where we explore a variety of topics to help you grow your bootstrapped business. I'm your host, Brett Trainer. Each week, I have a conversation with leading experts in the areas of growth, execution, people, leadership, wellness, productivity, and others. This is not the typical podcast. We have conversations that dig deep into each of the topics that we cover. The goal is to provide cutting-edge but proven tactics and strategies to grow your business. The Biz Owner 360 podcast is now recognized as a top 5% international podcast and still growing. Today, I welcome back Michal Haynes to the podcast. I believe this is his fourth trip with us over the years. Michal is an SMB growth advisor based in Australia, author, and frequent podcast guest. As usual, we tackle a number of topics, but we do dig in quite deep into a number of underappreciated growth strategies and also buyer-centric approaches that entrepreneurs, you should be using. There is a reason why Michal is one of my favorite guests. Tune in and find out why. Now, on to the interview. Hey, Michal, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here again.
It's always my pleasure, and I've actually kind of lost count how many times you've been on the podcast. I know you've been on for each of the name changes, so it's only fitting that you come back in the early days of Biz Owner 360 and help us kick it off.
I think this is my fourth time on.
I think that is
podcast, but it's great. We always touch on different topics, different themes, and our discussions always lead us down different roads. So always good and enlightening from my perspective.
And always one of our most listened episodes. So that's why we keep
really?
back, because people like to hear what you have to say. So don't disappoint us.
I find that
no pressure.
Amazing. Okay, I'll run with it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And what we kind of chat offline, but really for this one, we're still early part of 2022, and we've had some themes like, how do we as entrepreneurs and business owners kick some ass this year? What are some of the key themes? So I want to bring in some of the experts to say and share your perspective on, what do we need to do to break through and get the businesses going again? But before we get off and running, in case any of the audience is new and have not heard you in the past, why don't you share a little bit about your background, what you're working on today, and we'll jump into it.
Sounds good, Brett. So my name is Michal Haynes. I'm an SMB, business growth specialist. And for those of you in other parts of the world, SME, business specialist. So my passion is working with small and medium-sized, heavily run the service-based organizations. So your professional service firms, law, engineering, your education and training firms, IT, telco firms, financial service firms. And I do a lot of work with the CEOs and the leadership teams of those businesses who want to acquire and retain and grow those business clients and customers. So I'm your SMB, B2B specialist. That's the area that I focus in. I reside in the beautiful city of Sydney, Australia, but as you can tell by my accent, I'm not a born and bred Aussie, so I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I work internationally, globally. Australia, Canada, and the United States are my three core markets, but I do work with folks, a fair bit of folks in Asia Pacific as well. So that's
Awesome.
kind of me in a nutshell.
Awesome. And I was going to call you out. I'm like, man, I know you're based in Australia, but I heard some of that Canadian process or.
Yeah, I'm born and bred Torontonian. So I'm always be a Canadian. I consider myself to have two homes, Toronto and Sydney. And I'm very much looking forward to, Brett, rekindling my relationship with Star Alliance so that I can be hopping across the Pacific back and forth like I used to prior to all this madness of the past 2 years.
Yes. Yeah, you've been locked in Australia for a couple of years now.
Very much so. Locked in Sydney for a very long time, which is very unusual. But like everyone else, I have adapted. But I am keen to get back to some of my old behaviors of interacting with friends, family, colleagues, and people like yourself who we've interacted a lot, but we've never actually had a face-to-face coffee dinner.
Crazy?
But that's on the cards for 2022. We will change that. So.
I want to do it in Australia. We'll do a live show from Sydney.
For sure.
When we get
we need to do a live one from your end as well, because you reside near one of my favorite cities, Chicago. So we can do a swap.
We'll
absolutely. Live on location. Awesome.
All right, Michael. Great to have you back. Like I said, it's awesome. So let's talk about 2022. I know you've got some thoughts and the clients that you work with. What should we be thinking about? Where should we focus? Top
Sure.
priorities.
Top priorities. So, Brett, you and I've had discussions before on previous episodes and in our discussions offline. It's very important for us operating in the B2B world to be very much buyer centric and really focusing on being clear on who the buyers are, because there's a lot of movement been going on. The great resignations and people moving companies, going out on their own. So we need to know who those buyers are. What are their priorities and of their objectives, and really helping them to achieve those objectives. Over the past 18 months, there's been a lot of content. There's been a barrage of content that's been going out there. I like to call it content vomit that's just been overtaking folks, which was something I was seeing anecdotally from just talking to SMB leaders. But then Gartner put out a study which said that 55% of B2B buyers are overwhelmed with too much content. 45% of them just are confused because it's all coming from experts. But Brett, you say to do one thing, I say something else, HubSpot's saying something else. So what really business buyers, B2B buyers are looking for is what I like to call A.I.R, an acronym I adopted from my business coach, which is about advice, insights, and recommendations. So how do we move forward? How do we help them take the businesses forward? That really needs to be the core of what's going to drive our growth strategies for our SMBs, in terms of making sure we're connecting, reaching out to those business buyers, and really trying to help them with some of the key things they're looking for as to how to solve problems, identifying new opportunities, connecting them to people. There's a big need for connecting to people now to exchange ideas, to get advice, references, and referrals. So, Brett, this is going to have big implications in terms of, okay, we're going to use the term marketing, which I have a love-hate relationship with the term marketing. In terms of being true strategic marketing in B2B, we need to really be thinking about how do we approach that now? Because it can't just be about, throwing out those white papers, blogs, all of that content, which I'm personally finding an increasing number of SMB CEOs they just don't have the time for it. And so they're looking for opportunities for engagement. So we really have to provide those meaningful ways where we provide those advice, insight, and content, and where they're seeking for it now, which kind of talks into what, Chris Walker talks about, that whole dark funnel concept. I think that is highly relevant now because a lot of business leaders now, they will be interested in attending workshops, forums, going to the online communities, being to mastermind groups where they can get some of that advice, insight, strategic direction, but they also can connect with their peers, their experts. So your approach to go to market, your strategies around growth really have to be delivering those kinds of things and not just dumping of content, but really that value add strategic advice, engaging and working and connecting with business buyers to help them achieve that. So we need to be thinking about how we can really be getting out there and working with those prospective leaders that we want to do business with.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit because I think there is so much value. This is going to almost be our entire episode because you talked about the buyer enablement and around the buyer, which I think is so true. So, but if we take a step back and think about it from the owner of the business now, right, and may or may not have a marketing background, and we just said a lot of things that probably, to your point of the content overload, it's they know they need to be putting out content. So let's think about that. And I love the acronym A.I.R, and you may have to repeat that again for me. But if I'm the owner,
insights and recommendations. Yeah. So they want advice, advice on how, it's giving them advice about based on their objectives around how to grow the business. I'm getting lots of questions in terms of the inquiries I get from SME leaders they want to know how to grow the business. So where are the growth opportunities? What geographic markets, what industries, what customer segments should they be going after? How they should be growing? That's another big question that's often coming up. There's a lot of, and what's the best ways to do so? What I am seeing a lot of is that there's been a lot of default with all this content. There's been this, everyone says we have to go online, and there's almost been this automatic default that, that means I must do advertising, social media, and email funnels.
Yeah, right.
And I'm finding an increasing number of SMB leaders who are finding, and myself included, some of those things just simply do not work. Social media, yes, it's good to be there because it does give you visibility, but I'm starting to see, my personal view is that social media is almost like you've got your core elements that you're focusing on, how you're going to deliver value. So it might be setting up a community, having, peer-to-peer advisory groups and workshops. That might be one of your core things. And then you'll take that content and then you'll repurpose it onto social media to have that visibility, but it's not your core activity. But what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of default of SME leaders defaulting to advertising, social media, emails, which are things that many leaders are moving away from and they're not using.
Because I think one of the challenges, at least the challenges that I see with the folks I work with is, hey, we've grown the business. We're pretty good. We get referrals coming in, right? That which is one tactic, and we're opportunistic as they come. But if I really want to grow my business, I've got to pick a segment that I've got to go after, and I've got to reach people that don't know me today, right?
Yes.
So if we think about what you had talked about there from the buyer perspective, and we've got to put some content together to when we connect or want to do some outreach or educate that segment that we're going after. Is there a specific approach that you would recommend, or how do you? I know one size doesn't fit all, but is, hey, I want to scale my business. I've got to connect with people that don't know me. What's the best way to start thinking about that, or what are some of the building blocks we could look at?
Well, I think it's about the building blocks, because to identify those growth opportunities, you need to spend some time doing what I call in my framework and in my book, listening. We need to identify where are those growth opportunities. So step number one, talking to your current clients and customers, and even some of your previous clients and customers, talking to the decision makers, right? So that we understand and we're very relevant and understand what are their goals, what are their priorities. And we need to get a sense of how are they doing their buying and their decision making. Because there is a lot of self-education and research that they're doing in a variety of ways. We need to be doing that research, which is a combination of talking to current clients and customers, doing some of that, online research of, going through your industry and professional associations and seeing what are the trends and reports that they're coming and talking about where market opportunities are at, looking at some of those consulting firm reports, market research reports, which many a times you can get the executive summaries, which are often free, and that you can get some good insights there. So we need to do our homework and be doing our homework and our due diligence so that we're really understanding the landscape of the industries and the markets that we're operating in, those industry verticals, and then also understanding from that buyer's perspective, from their own word of mouth, as to what's the priorities, their objectives, and how they do their buying, because that's going to determine how we get visibility and what we need to provide to those prospective buyers to really engage and interact with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you advocate, and I guess it's specific for organization? I mean, because there's a lot of third parties now that can go help you do some of this industry research and customer research to dig. And sometimes it's less biased, right? If your customers are talking to somebody that's not connected. So I'm just curious if you've had one way or the other, if you have the resources internally to do it, or I mean, worst case, if you don't, find somebody to partner with, right? But
So yeah,
words in your mouth.
yeah. So great question. I believe that the whole listening, building that understanding around the industries, the markets, the customers and buyers, it's a bit of research, i.e., doing your academic research of going online, going through reports. Your industry and professional associations are often a great place to start, because they often are the ones that have all the white papers, newsletters, and all of that. So if you've got an internal marketing team, and I believe your marketing team, which if it's a proper marketing team, it should be your strategic marketing team. So they should be owning and doing that for you. And the team doesn't necessarily have to be big. You just need to have some person who has those skill sets around strategic analysis research. So it might be only one marketing strategist, analyst, but you should have one person at least dedicated to doing that kind of market analysis and listening. But you also should be talking to your customers as well, and having discussions
100%.
at the buyer level. It's very important we talk about making sure you're talking to those decision makers, and you can do that in a variety of ways. But even just having some structured but informal conversations, half hour on Zoom, making sure you're talking with that decision maker. Where are they at today? What are they looking to achieve? What are their priorities? Where are they getting stuck? What is going to be their roadmap? If they're a current client or previous client, where have you fallen off? What is it that they're going to be needing from you? Having discussions even around just some of those 5-6 areas will start giving you some clarity and focus as to what are some of the things we need to be looking at internally to move the dial.
And that should be ongoing, right? That's a living, breathing process, not just do it once and set it and forget it, right? It should be part of the ongoing to make sure if your customer dynamics or needs are changing, be out in front of it and not chasing it.
But in addition to that, Brett, I think there's an increasing importance in the B2B context is to really be tapping into the communities. The whole notion of
Yes.
community marketing is becoming quite relevant and very important in a B2B context. I just wrote a paper for one of the news publications here in Asia Pacific on this, but really tapping into those groups, those communities in those geographic markets, those industries where you're operating in, from a peer level as well as client level is very important. They always say your net worth is your net worth, but it's increasingly more so now because business buyers are looking for that connection, access to people, being it peers and advice. But so it's how you, by tapping into those communities, that's how you can start those relationships. That's how you can learn around what are the current trends, emerging trends, and current needs. You get to know who your competitors are, where are the opportunities to collaborate, etc. So getting involved in communities and potentially establishing your own community for your relevant world ecosystem is very, very important. And that needs to be part of your overall B2B growth strategy.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I don't know, maybe we'll do another episode where we dig into the community because I agree, because I think it's heading that way. The buyers and the users, right, maybe two separate people in these orgs, are looking for that sense of community. And from an organizational standpoint, if you can build that a community around your product, it's going to be super powerful. Which is not the way we've typically approached it, right? It used to be hey, Facebook ads, buy now, buy now, buy now. Maybe not Facebook within the B2B context, but we're moving away from transactional and trying to build that community around your product and your business. Easier said than done, but if you do it, it's incredibly powerful.
Yes, I think communities are very important. Brett, I would challenge you though in terms of saying building it around your product. It should be built around your product indirectly. So yeah, your product is going to be kind of the basis, potential of bringing it together, but it cannot be a product-centric community. It needs to really be a customer-centric, and hopefully part of that has to be a buyer-centric community in terms of what are the needs of the buyers in terms of helping them to connect to their peers, experts, what kinds of engagement, and it's really building it around from that customer perspective, from that buyer perspective, because it's not around trying to sell the product. Yeah, we eventually want to hopefully get leads, but it's really around having that exchange of information, giving them access to other people, colleagues, other service providers in their world. But that is increasingly going to become important because it's all around understanding and trust. And there's a heavy lack of trust in many of the industries in our B2B world. And so
100%.
advertising and social media and advertising are necessary for visibility, but that's it. We need to be visible, but that's it. Social media, advertising is about visibility. Visibility is not how people buy. It's how they find out about you. But then they're doing all this, self-education and research that they're using a variety of ways, online and offline, to then move them along their buyer's journey. So that's why I'm of the contention. Advertising and social media is kind of like that added ingredient. It's kind of the topping that you put on to the rest of your main course that you're creating. Because it is going to give you the visibility and spotlight, but it's not the be all and end all. And it's more about really being visible on those channels, platforms, and communities where your buyers are now.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. It is about creating that awareness, right? With social, it's or the reinforcing of the brand. Hey, we're out here, we're adding value. And that's why I love having you on, Michael. You call me out when I I say the wrong thing, because you're absolutely right. Because
that's my perspective from my
I 100% agree. I don't know why I said lead with the product, because I'm the one that says lead with the problem. And why would you build a community around a product when it's really about problem solving? So yeah, no, but that's, again, we've known each other long enough, and so I appreciate the dialogue. And you're absolutely right. I'm like, what was that? What did I say? So versus some of the folks I'll have on, they would have just nodded even if they didn't agree with that statement. So anyway, but I think you're 100% right. It is about the problem and the peers, and they're fighting the same problems. And if they can leverage each other and create that sense of community is a huge. So awesome.
And Brett, that leads to another element that I think many SMBs in particular, we need to be thinking about collaboration and co-creation. Those are the two other elements now that we really need to be thinking about as part of your growth strategies. And I believe every SMB, whether you are a sole operator, whether you are a micro business, or you're a larger SMB with 100 to 200 folks, that collaboration and co-creation needs to be part of your growth strategy, and it can be done on many levels. So in terms of collaborating, it might be everything from potentially, let's say you're a marketing agency and an IT company, you might combine together to do co-marketing events, like hosting breakfasts and workshops, the one-day retreat, because you're both targeting the same audiences. But it might even be something less, one step back from that, in terms of you might each be having your own blog and live streams, and you each go on to each other's, have certain topics, and you co-market, these upcoming episodes to your respective email list and your respective communities as a way of broadening your reach and access. So there's a variety of ways. So it could be around the service offering itself, that you're going to offer a holistic solution now where in terms of your whole marketing technology leads, you've got the agency and the IT company joining forces to provide that end to end. So there's a variety of ways that you can potentially be collaborating, from very simple things like swapping email lists and doing things like joint live streams and forums, to more sophisticated, more elaborated approach. But we need to be thinking about how to collaborate, because it's by working with others, that's how you're going to get the access, the reach, and the visibility, which is getting harder to do. You can't do it alone, so you need to be thinking how you can be collaborating with your, other service providers, even potential competitors, because they may be a competitor. You and I may both be consultants, strategists, but I may have one zone of genius, you have another zone of genius for which your prospective buyers need both. There's often opportunities to come together and work to say, I'm going to do this piece of the strategy, Brett, you're going to do the operational piece of the strategy, and it's a win-win.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great point. And I think there was, or at least back in the day, I've been around the block a few times, that, the channel partners was viewed as kind of a formal reseller and effective. Some businesses have multi-billion-dollar globals without any direct sales force, which I think is changing. But you're right. I don't think the SMB world or the small business has leveraged that nearly enough. And the way I kind of think about it is that like an ecosystem, right? Hey, if two come together for the better of one, and you're small enough to be able to do this and make it effective, where some bigger companies would really struggle to try to put those programs together.
Yeah.
Why not, man? Find those complements where you're both going to win. It could be formal, it could be informal, to your point on just, co-writing blogs together, or getting on each other's podcasts, live streams, or it could even be a formal relationship that, hey, we work well together. So really, really think this is, you hit on something. This is a key opportunity.
There's massive opportunities, Brett. And if you look at your star performers, if you want to look at your star performers in terms of large corporates, even some of those high performing thought leaders that are out there, with their, $100,000 mastermind programs and so forth. If you look at their growth strategy, these are all of those top leaders or top performers. They're collaborating. They collaborate with each other. They have joint ventures where they're cross promoting each other's services. They're swapping email lists. They're doing joint events. They sometimes have combined offerings. So even from an independent sole practitioner, if you look at those who are making the high 6 figures, 7 figures, they are doing a lot of these kinds of things. And then there's numerous examples when we start looking at SMBs, mid-markets, and large corporates. So that whole collaboration is a big opportunity. Co-creation is another thing that we need to be thinking about. How can we co-create? It could be around content. It could be around education. It could be potentially, creating a whole new product service offering, the service package where, to use the MarTech example, the marketing firm will do, let's say, the strategy and execution around branding and positioning, and the IT firm will do the IT strategy and the management and the implementation of the MarTech stack. So you've got the end-to-end solution. There's all of that. But there's also co-creating with your customers. So, working with your customers to create the right kind of solution, making it very tailored for them. But the key to that is to identify, when you've co-created a solution, where are the potential and the opportunities to roll that out to other customer segments, geographies, so that you can, we call it multi-tenanting, and it's covered in the book Gareth and I wrote, that you can use it. That's massive opportunities there in terms of winning with those current clients and customers, because you've created a solution. The example we used in the book was with a large grocery retail chain. the technology company created a very bespoke knowledge management solution for that retail chain. But then by understanding some of the other market opportunities and how it's be applicable, it was able to be rolled out to other segments. So co-creation with your clients can be a great way in terms of keeping them sticky, winning more with them, but it can lead to other opportunities as well. So we really need to start be thinking about collaboration and co-creating, whether it be with our other service suppliers, partners in the ecosystem, but also with our customers as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And quite honestly, that's how I'm building, my business is through collaboration in the sense of, bringing in people like you for specific problems, right? Or projects that we have. So I've got a highly vetted list of folks that I trust that I can bring in that I don't need to do myself because there's experts like you that know how to do this. So why would I do it? And then even with co-creation, this podcast is a perfect example, right?
Yeah.
There's value to both of us having us on, bringing in two different perspectives, and we're sharing our knowledge on what we're doing. So if people are looking for a smaller real world, this is it, right?
Yeah,
There's no reason, right?
Co-creation starting with content. So so simple examples. We can start with the likes of a blog. You can do if you're not ready for a podcast, do a joint live stream. You pick a topic, do a joint live stream. Each person can market to their database through their social media channels. Then when you get that content, you can then, repurpose it, promote it, promote it again. So even just, getting together and doing a live stream and then cross co-marketing it, that's kind of a step number one. Then you may want to move to workshops, where you start doing workshops and seminars where you're bringing in your respective target audience folks and providing engagement, interaction, some learning, and giving some real value. Joint workshops, and then you can have some follow-on activities to nurture and engage those leads, those senior execs. So these are some very tangible, practical, low cost, but very highly effective ways to deliver value, build the engagement, but it's not a massive investment. It doesn't have to be a formal investment. And then you can start, if appropriate, moving up to more formal arrangements, working together on projects, and you may want to announce an official alliance, but those are further down the track. But just starting off with a live stream,
get going, right?
Live stream, a blog,
get started.
Use that to get started. The joint workshop. Those are some very value add, easy ways, but can be highly impactful ways for you to increase your reach, visibility, and help drive the revenue and growth that you're after.
All right. So we've covered two of the three C's: collaboration and co-creation. And I know you mentioned offline there's a third C. What's the third C?
Or maybe I have that. Well, I think partners. I think really it's collaboration and co-creation. So really two C's as opposed to three. Yeah.
So sorry. On the spot. That's all right.
That's right.
Well, I'm sure we can find another C. It's all about the customer. So
it's all around the customer. And in B2B, we must remember it's around the buyers as well. I continually emphasize that because often I see companies that are better at being B2B customer centric often fall victim to the habit of focusing on the user level. So they're very good at knowing what the frontline staff need and, the operations folk and really delivering in terms of service levels, operational issues. But no one's tapping into what's going on in the boardroom. Where are they at? What are they needing? Because if you miss out on what's happening in the boardroom and you don't deliver a customer experience to the boardroom, because I believe you must deliver a dual customer experience in B2B.
Or even a triple, if I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think you could add the approver in there too, right? Because could be the user, the buyer, and the approver, right? And they have very different. So if you think of the approver in a little bit larger organization, maybe the CFO, right, that has final sign off, they've got to be risk mitigation. The user is like, man, I need to hit my goal. Or the buyer is like, hey, I've got to hit my goal. And the user is like, I just need to do my job better. So it's complicated.
It's complicated. I tend to lump the approvers. That's all part of the buying group. So I kind of put the decision makers, influencers, approvers. I call them the buying group. So we need to cater to their needs. But you're exactly right. We have to recognize the nuances amongst those different participants in the buying group. But to keep it simple, you have to deliver to the buying group, give them the experience that they need and the advice, insights, recommendation tools that they need, as well at a user level. And I often find, particularly when we're talking technology firms, telco firms, for example, and in financial services, my experience has been companies that are good at trying to be customer centric will often focus on the user level. We'll do the operational surveys, the service tracking. We've got our service level agreements, our service level assurances. We've got our process, and it's at the user level. But in terms of, okay, well, what's going on in the boardroom? What's their roadmap? Where are they having challenges? That's often what is missed out. And that's where there's real opportunities to really impact B2B customer experience, is at that buyer level.
I think that's such a good point. And I don't think we've talked about this on this show. And I don't think many B2B companies actually talk about this in general. But if you're thinking about that from the buyer perspective, the buyer group versus the user, right? Because almost all small business or newer businesses are thinking about the user. Hey, we solved this problem, your person, blah, blah. So how do we reorient or reframe our process, either when we're selling or even in our content, to make sure that we address both? I know I'm putting you on a spot and there's not an easy answer, but I'm just curious how you help business owners reframe or think about that frame, because it's super easy from the user. Here's how this job gets done.
It's right? A great question. You need to have those listening mechanisms and engagements to bring in decision makers. So I would say, given the environment we're in right now, you should be thinking about holding the breakfast forums, the workshops, the special retreat events that is really much around engaging those senior level, having roundtables to engage those decision makers, members of the buying group. So you're talking on their topics that are their priorities, topics that are important to them, around the kinds of things that they need advice, insights, and recommendations. And you're creating events, experiences, activities around that to engage and invite them specifically. Because members of the buying group aren't interested in doing CVA surveys, net promoter score, and all of that. Don't give a hoots about that sort of stuff. But when you can start talking around what are the upcoming trends, what are things that they need to be thinking about strategically around various elements of the business based on what their priorities are, you'll get their attention to do a round table, to do a lunch. And if you can provide them opportunities to interact with each other, maybe get access to some experts. So there's still room for events. I still believe, virtual, face-to-face, those workshops, round tables, forums, there's lots of room for those. And I think that can provide a lot of value, because that's what folks are seeking. You just have to be creative in how you deliver and execute to those. But, let's not dispel just because we're going online that everything has to become a white paper, the recorded webinar, the whole work. There's still very much value in providing people the opportunity to learn, but to ask questions, interact with each other. There's still very much opportunity. So creating those kind of events specifically for them, and then you'll have your mechanisms in terms of how you get feedback and engagement from a user level. So it's really by purpose and by design that you create the means for both. But you have to be thinking at both levels.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't mean to keep harping on this, but I think it's a really important topic. And so I'm going to go one more question with you in this area, because I think we think about, hey, we've got limited resources. We're going to create some content. So I think one of the biggest mistakes I see businesses make is they create the content for the user, right? Hey, this is going to solve, here's the features and benefits. It's going to make it better, but don't address the need of the buyer. And framing that is different than the features and the benefits. And so I don't know if you've got any quick tips, other than maybe it's just, hey, thinking about it from the people, the problem that you're solving and who's buying that from you. How would you present that to those folks versus the features and benefits will be important at some point, but that's not what they're buying, right?
Yeah, the features and benefits are secondary to achieve the priorities and objectives that your decision makers are after. So again, it comes back to listening. So, first port of call is, I would say, talk to some of the decision makers within your current clients and potentially some of your previous clients, talking to them to find out what are their priorities, what are their challenges, what are they trying to do moving forward, where are they getting stuck, and finding it from that perspective. So talking to them is one, and then again, doing your research. I hate to break it to you folks, but we have to do the work. So, spend some time, whether you need to have, if you have a person, again, my belief is you should have within your strategic marketing team, there should be that strategy manager or analyst who is doing this for you. If not, then leverage the likes of, Freelancer, Upwork.com, and get Expert 360, one of these platforms, and get a strategy analyst to spend some time to do some of this research for you. But do some research through the industry and professional association content that they have. They've got, their podcasts or webinars, their white papers, going on to like the consulting firms and seeing on their industry sections where they've got the executive summaries and white papers around trends in technology, what's going on in biotech, and go through those and do that analysis to understand what are their priorities, what are the challenges, so that you know what is in the mind of those C-level people. We have to be informed and act as a peer to the CEO. As B2B product and service providers, we are peers. We must operate as peers and advisors to the CEO. So you don't go into a coffee meeting saying what keeps you up at night. You say, I know X, Y, and Z keeps you up at night. These are the things. Have you thought about? Have you read this? This is what you need to be thinking about. This is what you need to be doing. We must operate from that level. And it takes research. It takes listening. It takes interaction within the communities and groups within our senior leaders that we're trying to, the buyers operate. We need to be immersed in those as well.
Know your market, right? I mean,
know your market, know your customers, but you must know your buyers as well. You must know your buyers as well.
100%.
In B2B,
start with the buyer and work your way
not
back.
Good enough. Knowing your customer in B2B is not good enough. And that is where 99% of organizations fail, because they know their customer. I know American Airlines. So if you're the catering company, I'm going to say, and you want to get into the training division because you want all the business for all the workshops being done by the training team, you need to know within that business unit who are the decision makers that decide who gets the catering services for all the workshops you're doing. You need to know who are those buyers and decision makers, who they are, what are their priorities, and how they buy. We must know at a buyer level. Being customer-centric in B2B is not good enough. You must be buyer-centric.
Yes, man, I love your passion for this, and that's why I think I keep bringing you back on. I used to joke you got to come out of your shell, but have some thoughts on this. But that's the beauty. I want people on here that are passionate about how we solve these problems. And time flies when we talk. But you touched on one thing. I just want to go one more.
Go for it.
Question, because I think you touched on something that's important that a lot of smaller business struggle with, is they don't necessarily have the expertise in a lot of these areas. And you had mentioned a couple of the opportunities. And I think that's, one of the things I'm focusing on this year is, as an owner of a business, man, figure out where your strengths are and where your weaknesses. Where are those gaps? Do you have that marketing person, right? Are you in the middle of closing all the deals and out in front of the marketing solicit? Take an inventory, if you will, of where the skill sets are. And if you don't have anybody, you can talk strategy or marketing or understand, who your customers are. That's priority number one. But I think the good thing is it's never been easier to find some of those resources. We kind of talk about ecosystem of your company, where it's becoming more and more experts in different areas that you can plug into, either part-time, full-time, contract basis, that can help you sync it. So I didn't want to end this without talking about something you mentioned that I think is really important. We don't have to do it alone. There's resources out there to help.
Yeah, there's definitely resources. There are a lot of resources online, but there are various options that you can be using. You may want to be using freelancers, independent contractors to help you, do some of the work that needs to be done. But it is quite important now that really to succeed in B2B, you need to have strong skill sets in 3 areas. True strategic marketing, which means you have an in-depth understanding of the industries, markets, customers, and business buyers that you serve. So you know who they are, what are their priorities, and how they buy. So you need people who know how to identify the needs of customers, how to identify growth opportunities, and say, what's the so what it means for the business. So you need to have strong skill sets in that capacity in terms of identifying market opportunities and needs, and how it translates into the 3 areas you need to answer: what to deliver to your customers and buyers, how to deliver, how to promote and engage. Second area is around business innovation. So how do you respond to customer needs? So your strategic marketing, those who manage and understand the needs and priorities and where the opportunities are, how do you translate that into products, marketing, services and solutions, joint ventures? So having skills around business innovation. And then, you need to be able to be effective at B2B sales, which again is about being that advisor and partner to the buyers to the CEO.
Yeah.
You need to have that skill set, which means you need to have some of these skill sets around listening, analysis, opportunity identification, being able to map out what solutions are, what's the roadmap, what's the action plans are. So those are the kinds of real strategic skills that you need for B2B selling. So 3 skill sets are required: strategic marketing, business innovation, and B2B selling, which is strategic advisory selling. Those are the 3 skill sets that you need in order to be able to execute your effective B2B growth strategies, which you can get on a permanent basis, contract, freelance. There are various options, but those are the core fundamental, and you need all 3. You need all 3 in order to succeed. Now, just because the expectations, behaviors, and requirements of B2B buyers, the bar has raised, and it's raised significantly. It's always been tough, but it's gotten tougher over the past 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, and it's going to stay that way, right? Those folks hoping it's going to go back, it ain't going back. So, Michael, man, I always appreciate your time, and I always feel like I take too much of your time. So
Not at
we'll
all.
continue to
Always
have you
a
back.
pleasure.
We'll lose track of how many times you've been on the show. But again, for maybe some new audience members, what's the best place for folks to find you? You kind of referenced your book. I highly recommend your book. I mean, I think it's a great. It's the best way to say it's a usable book, right? It gives you a framework. And if you're stuck, you talked about only one aspect of it to listen, but there's all 3 components. So again, not doing it justice, but it's one of my, my top 10 books to make sure you guys check out. So make sure you where people can find the book, and then also content, and how do we catch up with you offline?
Sure. So the best way to, in terms of all of my content and how to get in touch with me, 2 key places. First is my website, listeninnovategrow.com. So that's listeninnovategrow, lowercase, all one word, .com. On listeninnovategrow.com, that's where you'll find a lot of articles, videos, podcast interviews, tools and templates, all about how to build and grow your business by being buyer-centric in B2B. There's also a free chapter sample to the book, which is also called Listen, Innovate, Grow, a guidebook for startups and SMEs to acquire and grow business customers. And so it presents the Listen, Innovate, Grow framework, which are the 3 key activities businesses need to be doing on an ongoing basis in a B2B buyer-driven context. So listeninnovategrow.com, that's the big repository for the book and all other insights around B2B. And also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So reach out, connect with me. Any questions, you can contact me there as well.
Awesome. We're still waiting anxiously for part 2 of the book, Michael. So when I know I kid you every time, but I mean, I think
coming. It will be. It will be eventually, but going to be a little bit longer. But it's coming, Brett.
I'm teasing you because the framework is still very relevant today, right? Even the world's changed since before you wrote that. You were kind of ahead of your time because you had the framework right as we started to think about what business owners need to do. So I tease you about the part 2. I mean, I'm anxiously waiting for anything you write, so we'll wait patiently. But anyway, a lot of great content on his website. He is active on LinkedIn, so make sure you follow or connect with him there. And we'll have him back before too long.
Thank you for having me, Brett. Great conversation, good fun as always. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. We'll catch up with you soon, Michael. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. You too.